So.
Good morning.
Well, good morning. I guess we can just sort of chat amongst ourselves while we get organized here, but it's just so great to have this opportunity with Pastor Ann. When she first started talking about her sabbatical and what she might want to talk about or study during this time, the idea of storytelling came up, and we had some conversations about it, and it just evolved, and here she is, the grant recipient who's been doing all this great work, and so we're excited to share some words of maybe wisdom.
Yeah.
And fun.
And fun.
And fun.
Thank you for being here. Let's see. I've been talking about stories a lot, and I'm convinced that story, and in particular the story of Jesus, is what's going to save the world. And we're so polarized and divided, and that storytelling is going to be one of the only things that can overcome that divide. Because telling your story and listening to a story creates empathy in a way that political debate can't do. So if you're tired of hearing about stories, you are in for a disappointment. Humans are built for stories. We've been telling stories for thousands and millions of years. The Bible is a book of stories, and we understand our lives through stories. When you ask about somebody's life, it's rare that they would just give you like the bullet points on a resume, right? They're going to tell you stories about where they're from, who they're related to, the biggest grief or love of their life. They're going to tell you those stories. And because we're built for stories and we understand our lives through stories shape us. That's the stories that we tell about ourselves and the stories that we tell about other people shape us and shape those other people. If you have stories about the people who live on the other side of the tracks, you see them differently and understand them differently, right? Stories shape our identity, our values, our sense of self, and even our faith. If you grew up in a house with people who told you that you could do whatever you wanted to do, and you were super smart, and they were encouraging and gave you the story of a competent, smart person, that's very different than somebody who grew up in a house where people may have said you're worthless, you don't know anything, right? Like those stories shape people's lives, and they shape our faith. That is a very brief introduction, and I am so excited that the grant that many of you helped me put together was accepted, and it includes funds for all of you to share stories, right? Like, so there'll be money to take somebody from church out to coffee and listen to their stories. Or if you want to form a small group and you get together a couple times, we'll give you money to all go out to dinner together at the end, right? And there'll be money to bring in a local organization that will host a storytelling workshop, okay? So there's all kinds of things in the works over this next year to spend all that free money. And I wanted to facilitate meaningful storytelling among all of you because for the past 7 or 8 years, I've gotten to hear your stories. It's one of the privileges of being a pastor. People open up to you, maybe in a way that they don't for other people. And I'm starting to feel kind of guilty that I know all of these fabulous stories and that you all don't. And you should. You should know the stories of your brothers and sisters in Christ. I want to facilitate this meaningful storytelling because stories draw us together and strengthen the bonds between us. The friends that know your story from high school or from college or from when your kids were little, right? There's a bond there. Am I right? Yes? And also because we learn through story, we build our faith through story, and we gain empathy through story. So this is why I wanted to write the grant proposal about storytelling. So today we will be experiencing something called a witnessing conversation. This is based in narrative theory, which I studied in seminary. I almost said cemetery. And it's a particular type of storytelling because we, if you hear someone's story, even in passing, even at coffee hour at church on Sunday morning, you don't necessarily then step back and reflect on what you've just learned, right? Take that time to intentionally think about, what did this person share with me? What does that say about who they are and what they value? What does it inspire in me, or what does it make me feel? We very rarely do that kind of reflecting when we share stories. So a witnessing conversation is a pretty mapped out conversation where we build in that kind of reflection time. How many of you have heard a story from someone and then you go and tell it to your spouse or your friend at the end of the day about how much it meant to you, but you don't tell the person that told you the story, right? Like, how great would it be if the stories that you tell were really impactful for people, that they told you that, right? So this witnessing conversation will do that. It's meant to kind of open up the telling of a story and process, in this case, what Marion will say, and then we'll process what you heard. So it's a way of demonstrating the power of storytelling. We all know it, and we feel it, and we live it, but this is kind of a step-by-step demonstration of how stories shape the teller and the listener. It's my hope that through this demonstration you'll get excited about these upcoming opportunities for storytelling and story sharing through small groups, one-on-one conversations, and a workshop that will be coming up. And maybe get you thinking about the next time someone tells you a story. So that is my hope for today. I've heard this story that Marion is about to tell, and it was so wonderful. I pulled her aside and was like, I'm gonna do this thing and I need you to come tell the whole group your story. And she was gracious enough to agree. So I'm very excited, and I wanna prepare you to be good listeners. So, everybody take a second, take a big deep breath. All the crazy stuff you're thinking about you have to go to the grocery store, or you have to do laundry, or you've got to finish some chore, let it all go. And just be here in this moment, ready to listen. That's your only job for the next 15 minutes, is to just listen. And to pay attention to your own self. What parts of Marion's story are you drawn to? When she, what parts of her story do you almost like lean forward because you are drawn in? What words, images, or pictures come to your mind? What values are evident in her story? The stories we tell are often stories that betray our deepest values and truths. It's a mirror into who we are. And what touched you or made you feel something personally, not professionally or academically, but what is tied to you personally? This story is a lovely, heartwarming story. Not all stories are lovely and heartwarming. We're starting out on a very positive note here. But the goal of this kind of listening, if we had a different type of story, a really difficult story, the point of this kind of listening is not to raise your hand at the end of it and go, know what I would have done? I would have done something different, and not gotten myself into that trouble. Or why did you do that? Or kind of judgmental questioning or searching for information is not the point here. It is to connect with the ways in which this story connects to you. Does that make sense? Okay, perfect. Okay, so get ready. Marion has a story to tell us. Do you want to stand? How do you feel?
Well, I have just a couple notes to
Okay.
get me on track,
Okay.
so I'll have to.
This is
refer to
Marion
them.
Heinz. Do you all know Marion Heinz? Because you're about to know her better.
Yes. It's just really such a joy to be able to do this with you this morning. And I was thinking it would have been great to be sitting around a campfire or sitting in front of a fireplace, and enjoying. Those are the best places to tell stories. But we don't have that this morning. But we have each other. We have this beautiful room, so let's do it. One of the things about telling stories comes with old age. You have a lot of wisdom, a lot of experiences that you've had in your life, and you want to be able to share them to people who will listen to them. And one time we were at our lake cottage. We'll get to my story, but this is background. And I had read this book about the gift of years, all the things that as you get older are special gifts to you. And one of them is the legacy of the stories to be told. So we were at our cottage. We have a cottage in central Wisconsin, and we were sitting around the table. I was there with all my grandchildren, which never happens, rarely, that we're all together. And I said, do you guys know how this cottage came to be? We go there, we have fun, but did anybody know? How did we get here? How did this place come to be? So I told them the story of their grandpa and how, their great-grandpa actually, how he had this dream to have a cottage. And he was a Lutheran school teacher, so he didn't have real much money, but he saved and saved and saved. And so we bought this land, and they built, some of the teachers from the high school and my dad built this cottage. And that was 56 years ago, and it's still ours, and we still go there. And the kids were all like, oh, I didn't know that. I'm like, well, why didn't my children tell them? They should have done that, but they didn't. But now they kind of all know, and I thought, that just kind of woke me up. I thought, well, there's so many things like that we really take for granted, but that we should share. And so as we get older, that's something to think about. Let me see. So, the generations of stories, the generations of people who have gone before us are so, so, so precious. And that is the case about my grandma, Emma. who was my mother's mother. And she was just an absolute dear. She loved us all with complete abandon, and my grandpa did too. But let me give you a little bit of background to my story. I was the first grandchild, the first niece, the first baby in our family. So I was very special. I didn't find that out until years later that I really wasn't that special. But because I was the first one, now, years later, translated, that means that now I am the oldest one, too, which is another realization. So both of my grandfathers were Lutheran ministers. My one grandpa was a pastor of a big church in Milwaukee, big urban church. My other grandpa was a country pastor, and he was in the country with his chickens and his church. So they were just completely different, but they both of my grandparents lived in parsonages, right next to the church. And so the church has always been my spiritual place, but also my home, because I spent so much time in the church with them and doing churchy things. We used to be able to go, my grandpa in the city, my aunt, who was not married and she lived at home, we would go over to the church on Saturdays when there'd be a wedding, and we'd sneak up to the balcony and we'd look over and watch the beautiful dresses, and we did that a lot. And all kinds of fun things that we got to do with church because it was right there. And on Sunday mornings, when the people would be coming to church, both at the country church and the city church, we'd be looking out the window. Oh, there's Mrs. Bulow. She has a new dress. Oh, there's the Booth family. Grandpa's not there today. I wonder what's wrong. So it was just our family. It just was part of what we did and who we were for all those years. Our family was very close. I had cousins, I had aunts and uncles. We were very close. We spent a lot of time together. And when I was 10 years old, my grandpa of the city church died of a cerebral hemorrhage very suddenly, and it was so sad. I mean, it was just beyond anything that any of us had ever experienced before, because we loved him so much, and everybody who knew him loved him, and his congregation loved him, and his funeral, I will never forget. Well, the church was packed, and on one side of the church there was all Lutheran pastors robed and singing. The singing was just incredible. And the other thing I remember is that my cousins and I got to ride in a limousine to the cemetery, which that was a big deal too. But my grandma they were just so dear. And about 8 years later, my grandma had cancer, and she was very sick, and she was going to be dying shortly. And my mom and her sisters took care of my grandma. So when my grandpa died, just back up, my grandma had always lived in this big parsonage, big church, big house. And when my grandpa died, she had to move out of the parsonage, and she moved to a little upper flat with my aunt, the one that wasn't married. So this was a huge change for her to be part of this big thing and then have to move into this little flat. But she didn't let it bother her. She was happy, and she took care of us and loved us, and so that was great. So when she came, we got so sick, then my mom and her sisters took care of her in this upper flat. And they sang hymns together, read the Bible together, talked about family stories together all the time. And I was away at college, so I didn't get to be part of this, being with her. I had gone that summer before, I had gone to visit her every day when she was in the hospital. But then I went to college, and so I didn't see her as regularly. And I got the call, it was a Sunday morning, at about 8:30, my dad called and said Grandma died during the night. And I was far away. I couldn't do anything except figure out how I was going to get home. So then I did go home and we had the funeral, but then in the meantime, they had to clean out my grandma's things and go through everything, you know, and so they did that. And they found papers of hers and they found a letter, but they just stuck it in a Bible, and, you know, because when you're in that situation, you just have so much to deal with. So they didn't look at every piece that came out of her house. So then, well, life went on, and then when my mother passed away and my dad, they died 11 weeks apart, we had to do their whole house. And when we were cleaning things, I came across my mother's Bible, and in that Bible was this envelope. I thought, what is that? Whose writing is that? Well, that was our grandma's writing on this envelope. So I opened it up, and this is what it said. And this is actually in her own handwriting. My dear children, one never knows when one's last hour may come. And when God would call me, I would like to say these last few words to all of you. Always let your greatest and most important desire be to be true to your Savior, Jesus Christ. Let the eternal welfare of your soul be your uppermost concern. Earthly riches vanish and are not lasting. Let nothing ever shake your faith, and never leave your Lutheran church. Raise your children in this strong faith as you all have learned it. Pray diligently. I also thank you, my dear children, for all the love you have shown and given me. Your mother and grandma, Emma Dietz. Mm-hmm. Well, that was quite a find. It was quite a find, and she was just speaking her heart to our hearts. And because she didn't know when somebody would find it, but she wanted someone to find the letter. And it was years later that we found the letter. So then it was, well, what do we do with this letter? I mean, I didn't feel like I could be the only one to share it. And so with this family, we always get together every Christmas. And the first one I can remember was 75 years ago when we started, when we were little children. Every Christmas, all the cousins and aunts and uncles, everybody, we'd get together. And we still do that to this day. And so when we found this letter, I thought, we have to share that with our cousins who come now at Christmas from all over. I'm the oldest now, and little Franny Rose is a year old, and there's many in between. We number about 50 now when we get together. So we read this letter as a reminder of where we all came from, of our faith, of our Savior, and what is this bond that held us together all these years and that will continue to hold us going forward in the future. And it's really been special. And guess what? Most of us still are Lutheran. There's a few that aren't, but we're all Christians, and our children, we're bringing up our children as Grandma told us that we should, but this was just the most precious gift that she could have given us. So she is still in our hearts. So that is my story. And being able to tell this story is a holy privilege for me. I am the keeper of it, I'm the teller of it, and I am blessed because of it. Thank you.
Don't you all want to be best friends with Marion? It's a wonderful story, right? Yeah. Okay, so we could just hear that story and go on our way, right? But we're not going to do that. We're going to kind of break it open and talk about it. So I'd like you to talk with someone near you, preferably someone you're not married to, or in a small group, you know, like 3 people or so, and I want you to talk about what you heard. This is a quote from a narrative theorist. In the same way an eardrum resonates when touched by the reverberations of sound waves, aspects of our own lives can resonate in response to stories and images. So I'm looking for the parts of Marion's story that made you resonate or reverberate. And some questions that might help you recognize those moments are, what made you yearn or smile or sigh? There was a moment when almost everybody laughed together, right? So what sparked that for you? What captured your imagination? What was new or made you think about something in a new way? What are you thinking about now that you would not be thinking about if you hadn't come here today? Or what personal experiences of your own kind of lit up or came into your memory while you were listening? You know, maybe you got an image of your own grandma when you were listening, right? And the way that she loved you. So we're going to take some time to just talk to somebody or a couple people near you. I'll leave these up so that they can kind of guide your discussion. But please reflect on Marion's story.
Happy anniversary. And Dolly usually does that. You're not supposed to be with your husband.
Alright, then I can tell you. Okay. Are you here? So what do you think?
I heard a lot. That was very close to that. But now, they're all over.
Everybody's
Well, then they sometimes don't. They have to they don't want to spend 4 days rides here. But it's not like
It's so jammed there.
and that's because it gets yeah, definitely another like generation. But I just maybe I can that generation. That's
Across the country. My grandparents were ready to give it because it just got started up. But it was because my mother, I think
How did you react to all that? I heard the part about I was looking some of the skirt. More like and not really knowing when are they going to find it? What are they going to do? So I kind of want to like have the freedom and have it be there. These are the party guys. Sit behind the curtain and listen in, okay? And then, well, okay, they got it. Or, oh man, nobody came. With pearls of wisdom. She gave them all while she was alive. She didn't have any left. I don't know if she didn't have any left over. She couldn't take it. So what made me think about it was, okay, I gotta leave a message. Something come out for people. The old families used to do it in the Bible. I look back at the family's life. Messages, letters, little things that I grew up in
It has become clear to me that some of you are totally off topic. So I'm going to bring you back together. And Marion said, I have one more thing I want to tell you about my grandma.
I just really wanted to tell you this, and I didn't went off my notes, but my grandma was the sweetest, dearest, loving wife to my grandpa, the minister. He had like 3 services every Sunday, and he was in ministry with his father. So it was my great-grandfather and my grandpa that co-served together. So on Sunday mornings, my grandma always called my grandpa Schatzi. Anybody who's German knows that, how sweet that is. So Grandpa was always Schatzi. And when he would walk those steps from the church to the parsonage, she would have every Sunday a glass of lemonade with 7-Up, and he would come in, take off his coat, sit in this chair, and she would give him that lemonade. And that was just, the love was just all around us all the time. And that's why that letter was so precious.
Marion,
Thanks.
was that your urban grandma or your rural grandma?
No, that was my urban grandma.
City mouse, country mouse. Okay, so what I'd like to do now is kind of hear what some of your conversations were. What resonated with you? What captured your imagination? What was new or what lit up for you? Who's willing to, we'll just have a conversation about your reflections on Marion's story. And Marion's gonna listen, because then the next step of a witnessing conversation is that then she gets to say what it meant to her to hear all of your reflections, okay? Because stories shape the teller and the listener, right? So, what were your reflections? What did you learn? Yeah, Herb.
My grandmother on my father's side, our farms were adjoining, and she would babysit for us. And she was such a wonderful person. We never wanted to misbehave because we thought we would hurt Grandma's feelings. We thought so much of her, and she just came across that way.
So you remembered the love of your own grandma.
Yes.
Yeah, which is a lovely thing to remember, isn't it? Nobody can love you like a grandma loves you.
And then my biggest regret is our children could never have gotten to know her.
Yeah. What else? Yeah, Sue.
It reminded me that my mom wrote a letter before she died, but she was not able to write, as I was telling the group here, on stationery. That was very nice. It was scribbled on a scratch pad of paper that she found. She was in a nursing home by then, and she was not always clear.
Yeah.
And I don't mean dementia. She would have these like hallucination things. But she wrote down how much she cared for us, how she was not afraid to die. She knew God was with her. And I've kept that. But when I heard your story, I thought, I've not shared that.
Yeah.
And I will now.
Can you hear Sue?
No.
Okay, sorry. So Sue's mother wrote a letter about how she loved her children. She wasn't afraid to die. It wasn't kind of nicely put on a piece of stationery like Marion's grandma. It was on a scratch piece of paper at the nursing home, right? And Sue remembered that she had the letter, but then she also remembered that she'd never shared it with the rest of her family. And she said, but I will now, right? Okay, who else? Jan.
I was sharing that my mother died in July of 19, and my dad in October of 20, in the midst of the pandemic, which eliminated us from seeing him very much. But when we were going through things, my sister found on a piece of scrap paper also his testament of faith. But the thing that touched our heart was he had previously had a stroke, which took away his right hand and arm, couldn't write, and how he was always so frustrated because he couldn't write very well with his left hand, and he wrote this whole testament. Dear Lord, I don't question. I can't remember it all. And at the end he said, but I know, Lord, you will take care of me. And how horribly difficult that was for him to write that.
Yeah, because he had to do it with his left hand. So he had to write it, but how important it must have been for him to do it, that he did it with his left hand. It probably took ages,
Yeah.
right?
And I took a picture of it and sent it to, and it was on just scrap paper. It really doesn't
Yeah.
look very nice because it's scrap.
How many of you have some piece of writing in the person's own handwriting from a dear, dear relative? Yeah. That's going to go away soon, right? Because it'll all be on text or whatever. That was one of the things that resonated for me when you said this is in her own handwriting. Because I can spot my mother's handwriting from a mile away. I know my grandmother's handwriting. I know my dad's handwriting. And there's something so personal about seeing something that someone has handwritten, especially when what they're writing is, I know God's going to take care of me. I'm not afraid. Right?
And I have to go practice.
Yes.
Thank you for letting me share.
What else? What captured your imagination, or did you think about something in a new way after hearing Marion's story? Yeah, Paul.
What a central place the church played within the family dynamics is also within the community.
Yes.
And it was kind of personal that Jim's home church was my mother's home church in Northeast Iowa.
Did you know that before just now?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man. Yeah, so the church played a big role in the community several generations ago, but think of the role it played in Marion's family's life, right? What else? Carl.
I think it opens up where we have those rich memories of heart-to-heart love. God has at work through those stories in a very real sense of how God reveals himself through relationship.
Mm-hmm. So, can you hear Carl? Kind of? No? Carl is commenting on how God is revealed through relationship and through love and through that kind of heart-to-heart connection that we have with the people that we love. What else? Yeah, Patty.
It made me really want to sit down with my children, and I think we will have a family evening. I'd really like to tell them more about my mom, Jim's mom. My mom had a stroke also, and her right hand was okay, but she had only a few days to live. And she wrote on a piece of paper, she motioned to the nurse, I love my caregivers, thank you so much, and I love Jim. Now you'll notice, I'm the daughter.
She said she loved her son-in-law, but not you.
He's a good guy.
So, Pat said, it makes me want to sit down with my children, right? And have a conversation with them and tell them about my mom and the people that they weren't privileged enough to meet or to know for that many years. How many of you are kind of like, man, I want to call up my kid or my sister or my whoever? Yeah. Anybody else has something that they want to share? Yeah, Linda.
I just want to encourage people, like I just heard Marion say, that it's so important to keep that family together, to keep the cousins and the aunts and uncles and have a set time. We do that in my family too. We get together, well, we used to for Christmas every year, and between my sister and I, we would coordinate a time, and it feels neat. Well, now we're going to do it in fall because of flying expense at Christmas, but still, you know, just to try to keep the cousins, if they still want to get together, that time.
Yeah. What were you going to say, Leah?
Oh, I was just going to say to Marion that when you were talking about being the first grandchild and the first niece, that resonated with me. And Cheryl and I were saying, I was like, if I'm supposed to figure out I'm not all that special, I haven't figured it out. But when you were saying that, that was something that just really resonated with me, the love I felt from my grandma and my whole family.
How many of you have a time that you get together with extended family every year? How many of you are kind of like me and you have extended family that don't live very nearby, but you don't see them because there's lots of drama and weird stuff that happens in your family? Right? Because that's true too, right? It is. How do you think the annual reading of this letter has shaped Marion's family?
It's a bonding.
It's a bonding. Mm-hmm.
You better grow up Lutheran.
You better. Yeah, if you heard from beyond the grave every year, you better stay in Lutheran. Right? Yeah. Deb.
It also helps connect the next generation who never knew Emma to who she was, and so the impact she had on Marion now continues to flow out. And it's
Yes.
so powerful.
So she had an impact on the people she was able to meet and love, like Marion, but now that impact has extended beyond her death and to the next generation of people who are drawn together and bonded together over this same letter. You know, the great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren she never knew. Yeah. One of the things I love about this story is that Marion's grandfathers are the pastors, but Marion's grandma is the one whose letter they read every year, right? Mm-hmm. That her kind of testimony of her faith and her love for all of them is, you know, it's not an old sermon that one of the grandfathers wrote, although I'm sure they wrote many fine sermons. It's this letter from the grandma. Yeah, Patty.
And just, I wanted to comment that the fact that you had the letter, Marion, and that you didn't just reference it and tell us what it said, but the fact that it's physically present is so, like, that was the moment I was like, I can't wait to hear it.
I know.
Right? And I think any story about an object, when you have the object right there, it just is so much more powerful.
And she said, and then we opened the Bible and found this. And weren't you all like, oh. Yeah. Okay, so, and the other thing I thought about is, isn't this a lovely Christmas tradition to have with your family? My family like watches National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. You know, like that's what we watch The Grinch when it's on TV. We don't sit around together and read out loud a letter from one of my grandparents that talks about their faith. You know, we make cookies and we do other things, but not that have this, something that has the depth that that does. I also thought it was amazing to hear you say, as you're reading the actual letter that she wrote, to hear her words, earthly riches vanish, right? That's from the lips of somebody who was dying. They know, right, how useless earthly wealth is when you're on your deathbed, right? Like, that was very poignant to me. So now what I'd like to do is invite Marion back up to talk to us about what it felt like to share her story, but then to hear all of your comments. Because now this story has shifted for Marion too, right? Like, now it's not just the story that she shares with her family at Christmas. Now it's one that she shared with all of you. And so it's taken on a new layer of meaning and or complexity, and hopefully one that makes it even more precious to you. Okay, so come on up.
Well, this is the hard part. But it's so touching to me. I just really feel blessed to have been able to share this with you, or with a group besides my family. And for you to understand and know how important it is for us to share that love with those in our family, with those around us, and to share God's love. Because where else do our children, our grandchildren, where do they hear it? Where do they feel it? And that's a legacy that we need to leave also. And if you look at your grandchildren a little differently, or hug them a little tighter, or remind them that Jesus loves them and will always take care of them, that's what's really important about us, that we take that mantle. That's our privilege, it's our responsibility as older, some of you aren't old, some of us aren't. But that is what we need to do. We need to do that every day in every way, and tell our stories when we can, and just share God's love in big ways and little ways, and you don't all have to be Lutheran.
Did the responses you heard make you think about the story or about your grandma in a new or different way?
Privileged, grateful that you listened and that you took something from it maybe, and took it home with you and put it in your heart to share with your family. This will be awesome for me whenever I see that letter, or whenever we share it again at holiday time. My grandma and grandpa, part of the extension or the backstory of this was at Christmas time, my grandma would make her children line up, and she'd sit at the piano and she'd play Away in a Manger, and they would have to march in before they could open their presents. And they'd always read the Christmas story too. Okay, so that was my mother's generation. Then it came our generation. We had to do the same thing. And now we do that with our children. When my kids come at Christmas time, they have to all sit and listen, and we do the Christmas story. We sing songs before we open gifts. We also put the baby Jesus into the manger, so before any of the chaos, so it has carried on with us, with our generation, and I hope that it will going forward.
When she says they share the Christmas story, she means Luke chapter 2, not the movie.
This is definitely true. And now they're in college, some of them, and they get into these discussions. It's really been wonderful to watch the progression that started way back and continues today.
Do you think the Christmas celebration of your family would be the same if you didn't read that letter?
I think so. I think it would, because I think it's been ingrained, with everybody. If you would ask any of my cousins, there's 13 of us, they would speak as I am, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I want to close this with a cute story.
Oh, okay. I'm not quite ready to close it, but you can tell your cute story.
We heard John McGivern speak, and he's from a very strong Catholic family, 5 sisters. None of them were good cooks, they were terrible. And when they were older, they became good cooks. And he said, what changed? And she said, we turned Muslim.
So, what have you noticed or learned through this kind of witnessing conversation process? What has it been like? I realize it's kind of regimented or maybe unnatural in a kind of way, but what did you think?
It's a different way to listen to a conversation or a story.
Yeah.
I like that.
Well, then it sparked conversation about some of our stories.
Yeah.
With each other that were sparked by what she had to say.
Yeah.
I was just going to say it really reminds me of the importance of like intention with storytelling, because I think a lot of the time we get into these habits of just kind of going through life and not doing these things, but like she was intentional about leaving that message, you're intentional about doing this tradition, we're intentional about like structuring this so we're listening to it and commenting it on a specific way, where a lot of times you might hear something in one ear out the other and kind of like move on, but the idea of actually like taking time to think about it, maybe having this unnatural conversation actually makes it more important, and you learn more from it than you would if you had not had that intention.
Right, right. One of my college mentor wrote a dissertation on the fact that people don't reflect on things anymore and what a loss that is for us as a culture and personally, because we don't learn if we don't take the time to reflect on what happened during our day or what's going on in a relationship between us and somebody else. And I think you're right. I think it's sometimes in one ear, out the other, or we're just kind of trying to get by or get to the next thing, and we don't take the time to say, wow, that story really moved me. I wonder why why tears came to my eyes when she started to talk about the love that her grandma had for her. You know, and to think about that and think, well, it's because my grandma loved me like that, right? And I miss her. You know, just that kind of reflection we don't often take the time to do, and then almost never then share that back to the person who was telling the story in the first place, right? Yeah, Chris.
What I thought was really is the whole faith journey from her family. To me, that was amazing, because not every family has that in their background.
Yeah.
And I think, to me, that's such a strong pull for their family and their faith, and it was pretty miraculous that it was such a long, and it's still going on today.
Yeah, you know, there are lots of different things that can bond a family together, right? It could be trauma. It could be, you know, a shared history. It could be a love of the Packers. It could, you know, there's lots of different things, but I'm not sure how many families can say so clearly that faith is what binds them together, as we heard in this story today. You know, it's a I think a unique thing. Does it feel, do you know that it's unique?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Okay, so who's excited to tell stories? People are excited? Great. Please keep your eyes and ears open for more opportunities for one-on-one conversations, small group opportunities, and a storytelling workshop that will be coming to St. Matthew's. I hope you've learned something about the power of storytelling, and I hope that next time you're in coffee hour and somebody starts telling you a story, that maybe you listen in a different way.
It's hard.
It's hard. Okay, well, thank you very much. I'm gonna go do church. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for your story.
Oh, thank you. I wish you could have heard the end of yours.
It's too long. It'll take another hour.